My name is Lalu Davies Yemiton, and you're listening to My Brother Podcast.
Ahead of the threat, protecting the United States, its people, and upholding the Constitution. That combination is the vision and mission of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. My guest today knows all too well a longtime public servant who's been on the front line of defending not just our country, its people, but the very liberties that we hold dear. Perrye Turner, thank you so much for making yourself available for My Brother Podcast. Excited to have you on. Look forward to learning about your story. But if you would just introduce us a little bit to yourself, your background, and tell us a bit about how you arrived where in the seat where you sit at this point in your career.
So first of all, thank you, sir, for allowing me to be part of the My Brother podcast. I'm quite honored that you reached out and asked me to participate. I work for the FBI, as you mentioned. I'm the special agent in charge, and some of you may not know what that means, but I'm the CFO, the CEO, and the COO of FBI Houston. And in Texas, we have 4 field offices. We have an office in Dallas, one in El Paso, and one in San Antonio. So I run the FBI office in Houston, the largest office in the state of Texas. We cover 40 counties, 40,000 square miles, and we service 8 million people. And so I'm a 29-year veteran of the FBI. They say time flies when you're having fun. It's a very exciting career with a very dynamic, operational environment. And prior to me coming here to Houston, which I've been here for 6 years, I also ran the field office in Louisville, Kentucky.
Got it. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm sure, I think Houston is the greatest place in the world, but you weren't born here, so it all started somewhere even prior to you getting to Louisville, Kentucky. So why don't you take us back to the beginning of your life? Where were you born and what was your early upbringing like?
So I'm a native of Shreveport, Louisiana, born and raised, educated in the Cattle Parish school system. I went to Louisiana Tech University, where I got my undergrad degree in mathematics and statistics. Once I graduated from college, I pursued a career in the insurance industry in Shreveport. I worked there for about 3.5 years. Didn't really like what I was doing, so I decided to go back to grad school at Louisiana Tech to pursue a master's degree in mathematics. And while I was in grad school, I ran across an FBI recruiter and listened to what he had to say. I made application, got hired back in 1991, and been on board ever since. My father was worked for the railroad. My mother was a nurse's aide. I have a sister and 3 brothers. I'm the middle child, or what some of the country folks say is the knee baby. So, but hardworking family, had some very positive male role models. When I was young, growing up, grandfather was a farmer, retired from Ruston, Perrye, and my uncle was a sergeant major in the Marine Corps, and they were they were disciplinarians. They believed in hard work, education. If you got in trouble at school, you got to beat down when you came home. So it was all about doing the right thing and stay out of trouble and getting a sound education.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of always driving through Shreveport a few times. I've never spent a lot of time there. But what's life like, or what was life like for an elementary school kid in northern Louisiana?
Well, so when I first started elementary school, it was right around the time of integration. So I was one of the first kids to. I think integration started for me when I was in kindergarten and in first grade, and obviously there were a lot of race issues, growing up, and we just didn't really think anything of it. But there was separation, between the races. I recall growing up, playing on the playground, playing football, black against white. But I think it was. I think it definitely instilled, values. into us growing up, as far as taking advantage of all your opportunities and just doing the best you can with what you got, and also living within your means.
Certainly, certainly. So, I mean, that's just incredible to think that, that even as kids, right, in a sense, you're still not integrated, whether by design or de facto. It just kind of happened that way. So, the elementary school that you went to in middle school, high school, were they? I presume by the time you got to middle school, it was, I guess, fully integrated by then.
Yeah, so I mean, elementary school obviously was integrated, and Shreveport's a little bit different as far as the demographics are of each school. So middle school is mostly predominantly African American. Junior high school, high school was a mixture, like 50-50 African American white students, and once again, most of the kids that I went to school with, I sort of grew up with, starting. In the elementary, Shreveport is not a large town, and it's sort of separated by what part of the area that you live in. So you kind of grew up and attended school, elementary, junior high school for the most part, with the kids that you met early on in elementary school. So it's kind of like a small town, a city type environment where everybody knows everybody, for the most part.
And so you take your small town experience. How did you make a decision about where you wanted to attend college, and what was that transition like, preparing yourself for college from high school?
Well, I had positive, role models. I had an aunt that was a mathematics major. I think she went to Southern University, and I think she may have gone to Cal Berkeley, getting a degree in math, and then a master's or doctor's degree in computer science. So. To me, mathematics was a profession or a major for our entire family. My sister also went to college. She pursued a degree in engineering. My brother also went to college. So it was just a family business. Going to college, and also the values that were passed down on to us from our parents and our grandparents. My father, my mother. That they were not college graduates. So, once again, they encouraged us to achieve a higher level than what they had attained. Mm. So it's just trying to make life better for yourself and try to reach or achieve your goals to the best of your ability.
Yeah. And so I don't know where Louisiana Tech, where it is exactly. I mean, I know about La Tech. I've just never been there, but what was life like when you now matriculated college, and what was that experience like?
Well, I mean, Louisiana Tech was a predominantly white college. We had a relatively small African American population, from all over the state of Louisiana. Athletics was key, but it was an engineering school. And I really enjoyed, my college experience. It taught me, how to interact with people, how to be responsible, and also we had Grambling State University, 5 miles down the road. So once again, it's all it's a relatively small community. Everybody kind of knew each other, and it definitely expanded my sphere of influence, my levels of friendships. I did pledge Alpha Phi Alpha, the best fraternity in the world.
So I've heard.
and so some of the friendships that I attained while I was there, we still keep in contact with each other. I was chapter president, so I think Alpha is all about leadership, and I think some of the skills and some of the core values of Alpha, the fraternity as a whole, sort of helped me grow into what I am today.
Yeah. So you're a student leader while you're obviously at La Tech. What did you major in, and how did you balance, being super active as a student leader as well as the academic side of the collegiate experience?
Well, I majored in mathematics, and it was a tough major. Engineering was it was an engineering school. We were on a quarter system. So the academic or the calendar, the school calendar went kind of fast. So you had to have that school balance, school, college-like balance, and it was challenging. Being in the fraternity, it was tough to try to manage both. But the first couple of years, you sort of get acclimated or adjusted to college life. Towards the end of your academic life at the university, you sort of settle into yourself, develop that battle rhythm, come up with the game plan to graduate. And once again, the people who I hung around with, they were all serious-minded college students, people of similar backgrounds, similar yoke, trying to make something out of themselves and being focused and trying to graduate. And I was definitely successful in doing that.
Yeah. And so when you're about to earn your degree, what was your plan going forward, and what was the transition from your undergraduate experience in college to, what your subsequent step was?
So I wanted to work, being a mathematics major, I kind of wanted to work for a technology a company, but my GPA wasn't the highest. And I think that was one of the disadvantages of not having parents that may have gone to college that may have said, hey, you may want to make sure that your GPA is 3.0 or above, because that may, shy away, regardless of how smart you think you are or how dedicated to you think you are. That may scare away, some of the technology companies or some of the institutions that you may want to work for. So I basically took the first job opportunity that I had, and that was working in Shreveport, Louisiana, for an insurance company as a claims adjuster. And that was Aetna Casualty and Surety. And basically my job was a commercial property claims adjuster. And so you may say, well, I don't see how you could use or leverage your mathematical skills in that profession. But basically I would go out and adjust commercial property claims like, commercial buildings, churches, skyscrapers. And I was also part of the Aetna catastrophe team. So whenever there's like a windstorm or hurricane or tornado, I was deployed to those various locations to adjust claims. And so I think some of the skills that I acquired in that role also prepared me for my current role. Being able to manage crises, being able to interact with people, being able to provide information to people that may not be too positive or pleasant. And to have what I call tough skin, to let things roll off your back and not let it affect or impact you.
Mm-hmm. So you start your career as a claims adjuster, you're developing these skills, you're applying some of your mathematical skills, your critical thinking, crisis management, etc. Then you said you had a chance encounter with someone. How did that happen, and how did it end up altering the trajectory of the career path that you were on?
And that's a great question. So I wasn't really happy, with that career. It wasn't. I kind of wanted to see the world, leave Louisiana, experience life, and I just felt that I was not, growing in that profession. And so I heard about the FBI. I knew what the FBI's requirements were to become a special agent. You have to have a college degree, some type of professional work experience. I think at that time it was 3 years. So I waited till I had that 3-year requirement. I made an application with the FBI. And then once I got my experience, I said, look, I'm going to make a career change. I left. I resigned, and I decided to go back to college to pursue my master's degree. And so while I was in college or in grad school, I ran across an FBI recruiter, and he basically encouraged me to continue, with the application process. And he sort of helped me navigate through that process. And got on board. My first assignment was Huntsville, Alabama.
Perrye, before you get there, I just want to ask, what planted that seed, though? Like, I mean, I've never thought of going to go work for the FBI, and I don't think most people just naturally are. I mean, there's some people who may have, gotten a degree in criminal justice or something along those lines. But most of us don't just have this sparkle to say, I want to go work for the FBI. So what planted that seed for you?
So there were a couple of things. So I was always intrigued by, the detective shows. I know you may be a tad bit younger than me, but shows like Barnaby Jones, the original Shaft, Mannix, those type of shows. And also my sister, my sister, I think she had tried to become an FBI agent, but she didn't have the experience. And I think when I was talking to her about my desire to change professions, she asked me to take a look at the FBI. So she sort of steered me in that direction, and I did my own independent research and recognized that was a great opportunity for me to pursue, especially when I wanted to travel the world, get outside of Shreveport, get outside my comfort zone, and that's basically what I did.
Okay, so now back to, you said your first job ended up being in, I believe, Huntsville, Alabama.
Well, so when you get hired by the FBI, you have to go to the training academy, which is at Quantico, Virginia.
Yeah,
it's like a 4-month training program, and so during the 8-week time period, you determine what your first office of assignment is going to be. And I kind of wanted to go, so to give you like a wish list. And so you rank where you want to go. I think it's called your top 10 dream list, where you want to go. And I ranked, I think it was Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, Washington, D.C., San Francisco. And I think I ranked Birmingham number 10. And so I ended up going to Huntsville, Alabama. So I was kind of bummed about getting my 10th choice, because I kind of wanted to leave the South and and experience something a little bit different, a different culture, a different environment.
So what was training like? I mean, I know I'm a big, whenever I'm able to, big fan of watching movies, mysteries. There was I can't remember the name of the show, but I think it was called Quantico, actually focused on, and that's kind of how once you say Quantico. Yeah. So what was that training experience like? And what does everyone who started training, or is it everyone who starts the training that makes it through?
So training was quite intense, and once again, being a small town Louisiana boy, it was kind of intimidating. And so your class consists of between 30 and 50 students from around the United States. And first day of class, you get up and talk about yourself, your background. And I noticed that I was one of the younger students in the class. I think the average class age is like 29 to 30. And I was a 25, 26-year-old. So it was, it could be quite intimidating, but the training consists of legal training, forensics, white collar crime, defensive tactics, firearms. Also, there's a physical fitness, component, and you have exams. And if you don't pass your exams, I think if you fail 2 exams, you get kicked out of the academy, or if you don't conduct yourself in a professional manner, you can get kicked out. So I think we may have lost about 2 or 3 people in my class, but and there's several. I think there's like several classes. So your class may be 35 to 50 people, and there are other classes there along with you that may start after you or start before you. It's like they cycle you in and cycle you out. And once you finish your academy training, you're off to your first assignment, which is an FBI field office.
Got it. Are there things that people might do to prepare themselves for training? Were there things that you did, or did you just say, "Hey, show me where to, let me know where to show up, and I'm ready to go day one"?
Well, there's always somebody that's going to sort of mentor you through the process, like an applicant coordinator or applicant recruiter, and they'll give you an idea as to what to expect. I was very fortunate because, as I mentioned, I was in grad school awaiting for my academy date to start, and there was a young guy that got sort of, I think he got injured while at the academy, and so he was also a Louisiana Tech student. In fact, he worked at the university, so As I was preparing to go, he came back to sort of get healed up. He was recycled, so he kind of gave me an idea as to what to expect. He sort of managed my expectations, talked about physical fitness, talked about quantum dynamics, et cetera, et cetera. So I was very prepared, when I got there, and once again, I think some of the experience that I gained from being in crisis management, working in the private sector, going off to various training academies on how to adjust claims, on how to interpret insurance policies, really prepared me or really helped me navigate through FBI training.
Yeah.
And plus, I was young and in shape, and I was like a lean, mean fighting machine back then. So that really helped.
So your first job as a field officer, it's in Huntsville, Alabama. What was that transition like? How did that experience kind of set the foundation for your future career in the FBI?
So I was a special agent assigned to the Huntsville resident office, which was a sub office of the Birmingham field office, and I was the first African American agent ever to be assigned to Huntsville. At that time, Huntsville was maybe like a 8 or 9 person office, and I was, like I said, the youngest person there, and I was kind of apprehensive about being there, but they treated me like I was one of them. Very professional, looked after me, tried to find me a date. At that time I was single, so they were trying to look out for me, invited me over to their homes for dinner. It was just a very very positive experience for me, and also very welcoming culture for me, in my first assignment. And also the fraternity, they had a very robust graduate chapter in Huntsville. I still talk to those guys now. So Alpha, Delta Lambda, great chapter there. I'm sorry, that's the wrong chapter, but it was a very phenomenal experience. Great friendships. Really love Huntsville. I still go back on occasion to visit some of my friends there.
So what were some of your duties as an entry-level field officer?
So in a smaller office, you tend to work everything. And so I was a criminal investigator. So some of the things that I worked were, gangs, drugs, fugitives, criminal enterprises, bank robberies. Back then bank robberies were big in Huntsville, and some of the counties on the outside of Huntsville were very rural. So you had a lot of violent crime, activity. Also, a lot of domestic terrorism, and sometimes in rural Alabama, you do have right-wing, terrorist organizations that we worked at that time. But primarily, it was gangs, drugs, criminal enterprises, white collar crime is what I worked.
So, with such a small office, how do you allocate your time, or how did you maximize efficiency? I mean, when you said there were 9 people in an office, and I've got to imagine, despite everyone working on everything, how did you do your job efficiently and effectively?
So at that time period, so each agent had their own county. So I think at that time I was assigned to Limestone County, and that was a long time ago. So forgive me if my memory doesn't do me a good service, but so everything in Limestone County, every crime that came out of Limestone County that was a federal violation, that was my territory. And so that entailed me having to build a relationship with the sheriff, the various police chiefs or municipalities in that county. I had to have a relationship, with those people. And so that's how. So if anything happened, they would call me and say, "Hey, we got this bank robbery, or we have this white collar crime case. Can you come help us, or can you come provide support for what we're trying to do?"
Yeah. So how long did you spend in Huntsville, and what was your transition from, or what was your next job after that first position as a special agent?
Right. So I worked in Huntsville for about 3.5 years, and in the FBI, you have what's called an officer preference program, to where if you want to go back to your home state, you put your name on a list, and when your name or number comes up, you're offered the opportunity to come back to to your hometown. So my next assignment was in Monroe, Louisiana, which is about 100 miles from Shreveport. So after 3+ years in Huntsville, I transferred to Louisiana, to Monroe, Louisiana, and worked in the resident office there, which was part of the New Orleans field office. So I was in Monroe for about 5 years, and each office has a different dynamic. In Louisiana, there's a lot of corruption, a lot of violent crimes also. So that's where I kind of got exposed to law enforcement corruption, public corruption, complex investigations, Title III wiretaps, undercover operations, et cetera.
Yeah, so the more you talk about what your job entailed, it seems like so much more of it was about really a thought process, applying a lot of intellect, complex problem solving. So I know your training is part of it, but you've talked about your background as a claims adjuster. But people who thrive in your position, what makes them unique, or what helps them do their job exceptionally well?
And that's a great question. I think the more experience, any good agent, they develop what's called investigative instincts, and the goal of a seasoned agent is to work a case from start to finish. And like, for example, I worked a corruption case that was also it was police corruption, it was public corruption, it was gangs, drugs, and criminal enterprises, and it was started just by talking to my local partners, sheriff's department in North Louisiana, the DA's office investigators, saying, "Hey, we need some help. We have a corrupt city, a corrupt town, and we just don't have the resources to manage this. Can you come in and help us?" And so it's all about coming in, building partnerships, relationships, identifying what the crime problem is, identifying who the bad actors are, and coming up with a strategy or a game plan to initiate an investigation and bring that investigation to conclusion. And that's building a case and also getting that case prosecuted in federal court.
Yeah. So again, I'm just curious. So if I ever go too far in my questions, just let me know. I can't even imagine. So when you have a complex case, how much time are you having to spend on that versus other lingering issues or new developments? Again, with so few people operating in your office, I think sometimes people think, oh, it's the FBI, there's an army of people. But really, it's like whoever that special agent is. And I've got to think that you weren't working just 40-hour weeks.
No, absolutely not. And there's several parts to that equation. Once again, you're leveraging partnerships. With a task force, state, local, federal partners. You're also managing a caseload to where you have to you got to have a work-life balance, and you can't sometimes investigations can consume you, and also you got to exercise strategy. You got to develop an informant base. You got to prove or disprove that there's a crime, and you got to know the elements, of that crime in order to build a case and also to get a successful prosecution. So you also have to work with the prosecuting attorney's office, and you also have to have a relationship with, as I mentioned, with local law enforcement. Some of the cases that we work may not rise to a federal prosecution level, so that those cases can be, prosecuted in state or local court. So it's a lot of dynamics, a lot of planning, a lot of logistics that goes into working investigations. But at the end of the day, it's all about sometimes cases can be long term, sometimes they can be reactive, proactive. But any good agent can challenge themselves by working long term cases, and it's all about start to finish, what am I trying to accomplish? Am I trying to work the individual, or I'm trying to take out an entire organization? And the one thing that differentiates the FBI from local law enforcement is that we investigate organizations, not necessarily an individual. It's like in, eradicating or dismantling or disrupting an entire drug trafficking organization, to include the local gang or criminal enterprise there, within their respective city, to include, where's the narcotics coming from? Where's the corruption coming from? Is it coming from Los Angeles? Is it coming from Houston? Is it coming from Mexico? Is it coming from Colombia? So those are some of the things that we think about. And once again, is to disrupt or dismantle, the entire criminal organization.
Thank you for that explanation. I definitely, it's something I was intrigued about. So appreciate you shedding a little bit more light on what the work of an agent really looks like and feels like and flows like. So you're back in Monroe, Louisiana. You're building up on your career. You're earning your chops, earning your stripes. What happens next? And were there any major cases along the way that maybe provided that next break for you in your career?
Right. So, working in complex cases, I decided I wanted to give, management a try. And that case that I worked, it sort of garnered national media attention because it made an impact, not only in the community, but throughout the entire state or that region of Louisiana. So in order to get promoted, you have to compete against other personnel throughout the entire FBI. So whenever a job posts or opens up, you have to, make application to it, and it's like a career board. So once you throw your name in the hat, your reputation, your accomplishments, your merit goes before that board, and you're selected. And those assignments are in Washington, D.C. So my first leadership assignment was at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., and I was like a supervisory special agent in the Criminal Investigative Division, Mexican Criminal Syndicates Unit, or Latin American Unit. So basically, I would provide support to field office investigations. Let's say that someone wanted to do like an undercover operation or needed money to buy drugs or to pay bribes. I had to get headquarters approval or concurrence to support that investigation. So I would interact with a bunch of field office supervisors, agents, to get an idea of what they needed and also provide that support to them, from FBI headquarters.
Now, how long had you been in the agency at this point where you get to go back to DC?
So roughly about 8 years. So, once again, it's all about, reputation. It's all about merit. You're competing against other people throughout the entire FBI enterprise. So, those opportunities, were not hard to get. So you got to have a tight promotion package, and in order to be considered. And I think the work that I did in Louisiana, which was a target-rich environment, and probably still is at that time, afforded me the opportunities, to compete, for those opportunities.
Yeah. And so now you're in DC headquarters. You're in the supervisory role. How long did that persist? And presumably, when was the next promotion? But as you describe that, perhaps you might, by my calculation, you were in DC around when 9/11 occurred. So if you want to talk about that part of your career journey as well.
No, absolutely. And so I was in DC from 98 to, I think I left in 2001. So the way the FBI promotion progression is that you become an FBI headquarters supervisor, and then you go back out to an FBI field office. And so I competed for a position in Jackson, Mississippi. It was a criminal enterprise desk where I ran a squad of agents of gang, drug, criminal enterprise, violent crime agents. And so when I got there right before 9/11, and I recall driving into my office in Jackson when the airplanes flew into the building, and it was was definitely it definitely changed the way the FBI operated as far as our priorities. Because back during those days, our priorities were mostly criminal investigations. Organized crime, drugs, gangs, white collar crime, corruption, terrorism, counterintelligence. Those were sort of at the bottom tier of what we worked, our priorities. And so 9/11 basically changed the way we operated. And so terrorism and counterintelligence became priorities, and the criminal program sort of went beneath those two main priorities.
Hmm.
So most of the resources that we had to work criminal were diverted towards national security. So at that time, when I still was on the criminal side of the house, so I was doing more with less, having to develop partnerships with local and state law enforcement in order to address, crime, violent crimes, drugs, gangs, and those crime problems never stopped. So you just had to find innovative ways to stay effective in those crime areas.
So you make your way back south. You're back in Mississippi. You're out there busting heads, taking names, running your squad. And then, sort of what happens next in the journey.
So, once again, I did that job for about 4 years. And I decided to continue to move up in the organization. And so the next opportunity for me was an assistant special agent in charge. And that was the number 2 guy in command of an FBI field office. So I went up north of I-55 and landed an ASAC position in Memphis, Tennessee. So I was over the criminal branch in Memphis, Tennessee for about 2 years, and then I led the national security branch for 3 years. So I was the ASAC at Memphis for about 5 years, and that was a pretty interesting, challenging assignment. And Memphis is a very active office. We had a lot of interesting cases that I managed while I was there.
So your ASAC in Memphis, then you go over to national security. Is it after that? And one thing I want to ask, actually, this might be a good segue. You talk about these promotions, and I think looking back in hindsight, and it's easy to somewhat oversimplify it, but you're competing at every step of the way. Right. And I'm sure there are other people in the same field who are competing as well. They don't all land those gigs. So were there some disappointments along the way, and how did you pull yourself back up to bounce back from those disappointments?
Well, you just got to keep trying. I mean, you can't give up, and you can't even now. I mean, even when you compete for jobs, outside of in the private sector, let's say you want to retire and you want to do something different, you got to keep raising your hand. You got to keep competing. And once again, it's all about experience. It's all about what you've accomplished as a leader. Making yourself better, making yourself more competitive, more attractive as a candidate. And one of the things that I did do as a supervisor, going from a supervisor to an ASAC, I decided to pursue an MBA. I had the technical background, the STEM major. I thought that a MBA would make me more, well-rounded, as far as organizational leadership, looking at things from a holistic, global view. Sure. And I really enjoyed, that experience. So I started as a supervisor. I went to college at Belhaven College. Belhaven College had a campus in Jackson, and I was fortunate to transfer to Memphis when I got promoted, and I finished my MBA from Belhaven University now in Memphis. But once again, it was just a great experience, and it definitely prepared me for the next level, for the executive level, opportunities, about team building, how to build a high performing team. Once again, looking at things from a global, perspective, being more strategic as opposed to being more tactical, and also, leading people. I think those are some of the things that, I learned. So, basically able to also, leverage your experience and also your education to help you, a stronger leader, a stronger manager.
Got it. How difficult was it balancing your leadership in the FBI at that point, as well as, a class curriculum so many years after you'd been out of school?
It was tough. I mean, and so one of the things that I failed to mention is, the FBI does a great job I think we have one of the better training academies in the world. So along the way, you can go to Quantico for like a refresher. You could talk about emerging crime trends. You could talk about intelligence, leadership training. I did spend some time at Northwestern University, Cal Law School of Business, leading strategic, how to think strategically, because as I mentioned, going from a criminal organization to a national security organization, involves some change, and some people can be change resistant. So it was a paradigm shift. So some of the courses that we took were like navigating strategic change, at a mid-level management level, at a senior executive, leadership level. And, and I was like a sponge, in taking some of those leadership courses, because I really loved them. I really liked them. I think it really, benefited me in allowing me to grow, as a professional.
Now you got your MBA in Memphis. You pivot from ASAC to national security, and then what becomes that next move from there?
So once again, going back to FBI headquarters, and so the assignment that I got was the Deputy Assistant Director for the Information Technology Engineering Division, which was part of the Information Technology branch. And that was, totally out my comfort zone. I was very operational, didn't have a clue about information technology. So that experience, and then you're managing people who are smart, who are smarter than you, and you have to learn that, that language and nomenclature. So sometimes they can talk around you or talk over you. So you had to learn, that IT lingo. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a great experience once again, and also, rounding me out, not only being operational, but also, being administrative, and also understanding what role technology, plays in an enterprise. Our networks, how to leverage technology to make you more effective, more efficient, how it can enhance, FBI operations, cases, intelligence, partnership building, et cetera.
Yeah. So you go back, and now you're operating in a new era in the
Yes.
world of tech. And so
Yes.
what launches you back from that assistant director position back into the field, so to speak?
Well, it's just a normal progression, and I think I was kind of disenchanted with the leadership back at FBI headquarters, and so just to go back a little bit, when I first got there, so they hired me for my leadership. At that time, the FBI was going to a new case management system. They had spent a lot of money on a case management system that was sort of designed towards criminal investigations. And so once you had that paradigm shift going from criminal to national security, that case management system was sort of outdated. So they had to quickly pivot and scrap all that money and come up with a new case management system that basically was designed or geared towards national security, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, cyber and intelligence, and you had to basically operate in a more so in a top secret, secret environment. So that was another shift. So basically when I got there, my boss, the assistant director, he was like, hey, I'm gonna be down in the basement, trying to develop this case management system. So I need you to run my division. Mm-hmm. So here's the keys to the car. If you need me, I'll be down in the basement. So And so once again, that was an eye-opening experience, and having to hit the ground running. Trying to do a top to bottom, review as to what needed to be fixed. How to motivate people. I'm trying to figure out, who's what's what, who's your strongest leader, and come up with a vision, a strategy, to build a high performing a division. And I was successful in doing that.
Yeah. So you did that for how long, and then what was your next transition?
And so that was my first senior executive level position, and so that was part of the government senior executive service. And so my next assignment was back to an FBI field office as a special agent in charge, and my first assignment was in Louisville, Kentucky. I think that was back in 2012. Where I assumed that position as the agent in charge of the Louisville, Kentucky field office. And that was the entire state of Kentucky. And the office was, as I mentioned, was headquartered in Louisville.
Now, Louisville, I'm sure back in the bootlegging days might have been excited to be an agent there. And I'm a huge fan of Louisville because I'm a big bourbon drinker. So yes. I wish I knew you then. I would have been like, oh, can we do this interview at your headquarters? But it's like now it's like bourbon and horses. So, I mean,
right.
Like, what are the challenges there? I mean, is crime even occurring? I know it's a rhetorical question, but what kind of crimes do you deal with in the state of Kentucky?
Well, Kentucky is a very unique state. And, I'm a history buff. So Kentucky was, back in, it was I call it the upper north. So it was both a slave state and a free state. And I thought Kentucky had several, regions. You had Appalachia, you had Western Tennessee, you had the Midwest. And you had, southern parts of it. So it was a very interesting mix of people. And some of the issues that I experienced growing up in the South, like all the integration issues, like they went through integration back in the 50s compared to the 70s, where I grew up at. So there really wasn't many racial issues, and I'm kind of surprised to see that they're having issues now with the Breonna Taylor shooting. But I always felt that there was. I mean, I think law enforcement could have done a better job in building robust partnerships in those communities. Mm-hmm. But to your point, it wasn't as active. I mean, we did have issues with opioids. We did have issues with violent crimes. But for the most part, the main issues that we had were like some of the white collar crime problems. And I did become a connoisseur of bourbon. So I would have been a good person for you to know, about 8 years ago. But Kentucky Derby was a big event there, obviously, and we did have a security footprint at each Derby. So I was able to attend several Derbies while I was there.
I'm sure.
Oh yes. I was on duty. I worked. But yeah, it was definitely a great time in Kentucky. But it to me it paled in comparison as far as the job that I have now. So I was there for 2 years, and then I transitioned. This job came open in Houston, and I always wanted to work in Houston. Like you, I love Houston. It's close to home, not too far, not too close. And so when this opportunity came, I had to compete for it, and I got it, and I've been here for 6 years. But the comparison between Louisville and Houston is just, it's like night and day. I say it's 5 times the pace here in Houston, and 5 times the personnel issues.
Yeah. Wow. So obviously, I know most people think about Houston with this oil capital, but for someone like yourself coming into the FBI office, and I don't know how, I don't know enough about the FBI or law enforcement, but one thing I know unmistakably, and as much as Houston is an oil capital, we also have one of the biggest cases in the history of the energy business related to fraud. happened
Yes.
right here out of that same office that you now run. So
Yes.
that must have been significant moving into this, I'm sure, storied FBI office that's prosecuted some of these significant cases. So what was that like after you got the job? What was the feeling, and what was that transition? Did you feel added pressure of having to come into this kind of environment?
Well, I was kind of surprised that I kind of felt that we were underperforming as an office. And as I mentioned, I kind of felt that we were still going through that transition from criminal to national security, where I thought that we moved too many resources from criminal over to national security. And so Houston is a transshipment point, and for gangs, drugs, criminal enterprises, human trafficking, as you mentioned, the home of Enron. I mean, that was a huge white collar crime investigation, and also the Stanford case. So, and we're number 2 and number 3 when it comes to the number of Fortune 500 companies. So we have a huge financial sector here. Also, the largest medical center in the world, as well as 5,000 plus oil and gas companies. And lastly, a very international, community. And one of the things I found, interesting was the number of consulate, the consulates. So, a lot of international establishments are here, and I just kind of felt that we were not performing the way we needed to be as far as building partnerships, being respected by our our local state and federal partners, and also working the caliber of investigations that Houston should be working because of this is a target-rich environment. You got all this stuff here, so you got to have some strong investigation. So it's all about identifying strengths and weaknesses, and as I mentioned, coming up with a game plan to build a high-performing team, and also to enhance an office performance.
Yeah. So you've been in this position now for 6 years. What might you say has shifted from in your opinion? What has shifted about the office since your tenure in charge?
Well, I'm still very busy, and I think sometimes you can be victim of your own success. But I think building a strong leadership team, managing expectations, educating or raising awareness. Raising awareness to your troops, your employees, as to what our roles and responsibilities are. I mean, you talked about the FBI's mission, protecting the American people, upholding the laws of the Constitution, and also, staying ahead of the threat. And so, in order for us to do that, we have to, first of all, know what's going on. We can't be change resistant. We have to be willing to work the complex cases. We have to be willing to know what's in our area of responsibility. So, you got to encourage people to work. You got to push, and also I think the biggest piece for me was to build a strong leadership team. And I think I've gotten to the point now where I have a very strong leadership team to where I just say, hey, this is what we need to do. Get out the way. Let them do it. And when you need me, I'll parachute in to provide assistance to you. But this is your branch. This is your program to run. And I say that because, we have a national security branch, we have a cyber branch, we have a criminal branch, we have a white collar crime branch, we have an intel branch, and we have several smaller offices throughout my entire territory, Bryan College Station, Corpus Christi, Texas City, Beaumont. I have branch managers that oversee, all those components. And I try to run my office like a business, and, my lines of business is on the national security, cyber, white collar crime, gangs, drugs, human trafficking, et cetera. And once again, give your people the guidance, the direction, and get out the way.
Got it. If I can segue for a second, could you help me understand the relationship between the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Department of Justice?
Okay, so so we work over 300 federal, violations, and so the U.S. Attorney's Office, each There's several U.S. attorney's offices throughout the entire United States. So, U.S. attorney's office, there are prosecutors. So they basically prosecute our cases, not only FBI but DEA, ATF, Homeland Security investigation. So they prosecute federal cases. Department of Justice is like the corporate headquarters of the United States Attorney's Office. And so there's several United States Attorney's offices, as I mentioned, and their corporate headquarters is in Washington, D.C., the Department of Justice, or Attorney General, Barr is the CEO, so to speak.
Got it. So I want to talk again about some of the things that are going on now. Recently, the times that we're living in, obviously you've got racial unrest, et cetera, and there's a lot of economic hardships out there. When I read the newspapers these days or article online, more likely you see an uptick in crime. Do you have any thoughts about that and what that looks like in the near term, at least as we continue to deal with this pandemic?
Right. And so we have been very busy. I mean, so, during COVID-19, obviously, in order to keep, my employees, and by the way, I have like 1,000 employees in my field office. And so we have been on a reduced operating capacity. And when I say that, we're limiting the number of folks that we allow into the office, and we're encouraging as many people to telework as possible, if they can. And it's been very challenging for us because most of our work sits on a classified network, or a top secret network. So we have to be very creative and innovative and continuing to find ways to work these cases and accomplish the mission. With that being said, we've been very busy. I mean, this is the busiest that I've seen it. I don't know what was causing it. Could be that, like for example, some of the cyber crimes. We're seeing an uptick in cyber crimes. Mm-hmm. We're seeing an uptick in violent crimes. I think it could be COVID-19 related, like PPP money. This being funneled, out to various folks in our area. Some folks that may not be accustomed to having money now have money, and they're spending it. They're trying to buy drugs or what have you, and our drugs may not be available, so they're starting to commit, violent crimes, or there's frauds and schemes associated, with PPP money. There's also been some issues with PPE, fraudulent PPE, entities making representations that we can provide you with these large quantities of PPE, and that those quantities, don't exist. And I think the biggest piece is the increase in cyber crimes. I think with everybody, leveraging, telework or networks to do their work from home, it gives the cyber criminals an opportunity, to infiltrate your IT infrastructure, or try to find a way through into your company or your organization, try to find ways to plant malware or steal some of your money or some of your company's, money or resources.
Yeah. So that makes me think, in the 2000s, when you were working on technology at headquarters, or rather the late 90s, when you look at that time period compared to now, simultaneously, online security has theoretically gotten better, but has the issue of cybercrime gotten worse over that period? And if so, what do you see as the outlook for cybercrime going forward?
Well, I think it's always going to be a problem. I think, especially during this COVID-19 environment, and I think, technology continues to get, faster and faster, and some companies don't practice cyber hygiene, the way they need to. Some companies don't invest in cybersecurity, and it's not just, it's also training. It could be, training your employees, not to click on suspicious emails.
Yeah.
You got business email compromises. You got ransomware. Just educating your employees about the threats that are out there. And also, I think the newest dynamic once again is working from home. And having access to your company's network, and can an adversary target you to get inside your company's IT infrastructure in an effort to steal their trade secrets, intellectual property, have access to their bank accounts, et cetera. And I think the biggest key to that is just making those investments in IT and cybersecurity. And unfortunately, those investments cost money, and some companies may not have the financial purse strings to make those adjustments or those changes.
So for companies who can afford some of those security tools, are the security tools getting better, or the criminals getting better, in your opinion?
Combination of both. And so once they're always busy. So once you've you clean this part up, they identify a workaround. It's all about staying ahead of the threat. Once you think you figured everything out, something else changes. And I think with technology, with social media, with innovation, there's always going to be a challenge. There's always going to be something new out there. Being in law enforcement for over 20 years. When I first started, we didn't have email. We didn't have cell phones. So your cell phone is a computer. People have access to you. You have access to the internet, and it's going to continue to get sleeker, faster. I think our lives revolve around that instant gratification, that instant access, the 24/7 media. We want that information. We have a thirst for it, and it's not going to change. We're not going to go backwards. We're going to go forward, and it's going to be something newer, something faster, something sleeker, and it's always going to be a challenge. And I think that's why you have to encourage your people not to be change resistant. You got to have strategy pillars. You got to have a mission, and you got to keep reminding your employees, what our role is. And if we are premier, we have to act premier, and that's what the American people expect, right?
Absolutely. Getting my taxpayers' dollars.
Absolutely. You pay our salaries, and if something were to happen to you, and you want to call the FBI and says, hey, I lost $1 million. I need you to help me get it back. And you want us to jump right on it and to get your money back to you.
Yeah,
and that's what we should be doing.
Yeah. What do you see as the future of intelligence?
So we've come a long way, and and there's so much I can say, on the unclassified,
Sure.
on the unclassified, network. But we've had to do a better job in partnering with the intelligence community. So some of the lines of communications, we had to sort of, find ways to collaborate with not only our intelligence community partners, but also with our law enforcement partners throughout the entire world. So we may collaborate with the Australians, with the Canadians, with the UK, and that's what we have to do, because what impacts us also impacts them, and it really takes a whole of society approach to address some of these national security threats. But the biggest piece of that is information sharing. You can't just keep information to yourself and to where it can help a company or entity. If you have information that someone is trying to steal, someone's intellectual property or somebody's technology or somebody's research, you have to let them know that, hey, your technology is at risk, and you got to do a better job in protecting it. And I think that's how we have changed, over the years, to where at one time we may have that information, and we may be, challenged into pushing that information out to the consumer or the decision maker, who could benefit from it.
Is there anything that keeps you up at night?
I think trying to stay ahead of the threat, as I mentioned, things change so fast, and we have limited resources, and so we have so many responsibilities. As I mentioned, we work over 300 federal crimes and gangs, drugs, criminal enterprises, counterintelligence, counterterrorism, that we have to stay vigilant. We have to stay on top of everything, and we simply don't have the manpower to do so. And so we have to rely on traditional partnerships, with the community, with the intelligence community, with law enforcement. We have to be more sharing of information that may be classified, find a way to get that classified information out into public consumption. And that helps educate the community, helps raise their awareness, help encourage those folks to protect their intellectual property, their IT infrastructure, their bank accounts, et cetera.
Well,
you're on mute.
I said, I've got to get you to give the FBI a plug. So if you have a young person who's thinking about pursuing a career in the FBI, and let's just theoretically say they were about 17 or 18 years old at this time, what advice would you give as to how they might pursue such endeavor?
Well, I think my advice to a young person is be careful what you post on social media. Because when companies hire, young college graduates, everything is, they'll do a social media scrub just to see what's out there. So just be careful, what you post, what you have out there, what your digital footprint looks like. A lot of federal agencies, have, pre-employment, requirements or qualifications as far as doing a background investigation. So, you got to have good credit, you got to have limited drug use. In the FBI, you can't use marijuana within 3 years of your application. And also, we do a very thorough, background investigation where we go out and we talk to your neighbors, we talk to your instructors, we do a credit history check, we do criminal history checks. So just be mindful of that. And it's not just the FBI, other companies in the private sector are going towards that same model. We do pre-employment, polygraphs. So I know you're going to, growing up, you're going to make mistakes, but just think about the way you conduct yourself, the way you carry yourself, who you associate with, some of the activities that may, prevent you or prohibit you from, being hired by the FBI, or also even by the private sector or some of these other government agencies.
Are there any college degrees or career backgrounds that might be a bit more attractive or make a candidate more competitive?
I think you touched on it. I think cyber is, in my humble opinion, is the way of the future. So anything computer related, network related, is going to give you that competitive advantage. Also, a STEM major, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I think we definitely covet those majors as well. And lastly, law, and also finance and accounting. We do work financial investigations. We still do a lot of high level fraud investigations, banks, embezzlements, white collar crime. So we're always going to covet someone with a strong financial background.
Got it. So as my final question, what's on the horizon for you?
And that's a great question. So, you always want to, contemplate retirement. I can't retire. I got retirement on the brain, but I definitely want to retire eventually. I want to do something different. So I'm looking at either going back to the private sector, doing some consulting, starting my own business, or, just continuing to grow professionally and to continue to challenge myself.
Excellent. And just any closing words or remarks you might want to offer?
I think for, a young person growing up, just, be yourself. No one does that better than you. And, And if you run across adversity, don't give up. Just keep grinding. Keep trying. What don't kill you, make you stronger, and it prepares you, for larger and tougher opportunities. So just don't let no one tell you what you can't do. Just do it, and just be yourself. So, if you have interest in working for the FBI, it's a great opportunity. It allows you to grow both, personally and professionally, and we do have some overseas assignments. So the FBI is a global organization. I think there's a role or a fit for mostly everybody in the FBI. So definitely consider us as an employment option if that's what you want to do. So that's my 5-minute recruitment pitch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At least though, the FBI got their money's worth out of this.
Absolutely.
Man, Perrye, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for your transparency, your candor, and for your humanity, making what you do simply a profession, but not define who you are. You've talked to us about the importance of the FBI's mission of staying ahead of the threat and protecting America and its citizens. You've talked about the importance of being a well-rounded person, improving upon your expertise, acquiring further knowledge. You've talked about being prepared early on and making sure that you make good decisions about, just make good decisions overall so that those do not prohibit what could be career opportunities in the future. I'd also even put in a plug that you talk about the importance of having good credit and how all these other things build up on each other. You've encouraged students about looking at careers that look at the future of the threats that we have to deal with. My guest today has been Perrye Turner, Special Agent in charge of the Houston FBI office. My name is Lalu Davies Yemiton, and you've been listening to My Brother Podcast.
Going through thick and thin, brothers, you gonna win.